Welcome to Brake Magazine. My name's Lel Pavey, and this is readers' questions for the WR450F Rally Replica. We went to northern France to a really deep sand motocross track to test Yamaha's customer Dakar rally bike. It's almost identical to their factory bike with just a few small changes that bump the price of the bike way up. But otherwise it is almost identical. So as we've started doing with our bike reviews, we put a post out on social media asking you what you want to know about the bike, so we kind of don't miss anything. So first question comes from Lawrence Tyson. He says, how much to get it rolling on the road, and do you think it would make a good daily bike? So to get it rolling on the road, in Europe, my understanding is that it's legal in most European countries to ride that bike on the road. It kind of has to be to ride in Dakar. And the bike is 28,000 euros, basically. I think it's 27,995 or something like that. But it's essentially 28,000 euros. Do you think it would make a good daily bike to ride?
No. It's a bit of a thoroughbred race bike. It's designed to race. It's not designed to be ridden every day comfortably. If you're racing every day, it's great.
Yeah, but I would imagine it's probably like most rally bikes. It's probably not very comfortable.
It's not. It's the suspension's stiff. The power delivery's aggressive. The noise of the thing is loud. Savage. Yeah. Savage is a brilliant way to explain the noise of it. It's a great machine, but not for everyday use. It's a race bike.
I think if you want a dirt bike for everyday use, you're much better off looking at something like a WR250R or a CRF 250L.
There's so many bikes that are great for everything. Now that bike is great for racing.
Yeah, cool. So, why is the exhaust low rather than high? It's a little. Michael Corey's question was a little bit more complex than that, but essentially that's what he's asking. And there's a lot of good reason behind that, actually. The main two reasons are when you run the exhaust underslung like all those kind of rally bikes do, you can change two things over a standard high position exhaust. The first is you get a much straighter exhaust, which means you have better airflow, and more airflow means more power. You can get also a much bigger diameter exhaust, and bigger diameter means more airflow, which means more power. So that's the main reason they do it. When KTM and now Yamaha and Honda are building those bikes, their goal is to get the maximum amount of power out of quite a small engine. A 450 single is a small engine.
Yeah. So am I right to say it can't go in the frame because it would lose? There's not enough space.
Yeah.
So that's why it has to get at the bottom.
It would lose diameter. It would also make the components that the exhaust is near run hotter. So on an enduro bike or a motocross bike, quite often the exhaust runs real close to the shock.
Yeah.
So it'll make the shock run hotter, which means it lasts less long.
Yeah.
There's kind of a whole bunch of reasons.
Yeah.
It means also when they run it that low like that, it's much easier to work on.
Yeah.
Easier to take off. Kind of have a few different parameters, especially with rally bikes. You're not too worried about hitting the exhaust on things.
No.
And
it's not vulnerable. It looks vulnerable, but it actually isn't.
No.
It's if you put the bike on its side or you start going into some real tough terrain, you're hitting other things before you hit the exhaust.
Yeah. And also the rear tanks. You have to have fuel on the rear of the bike with a rally bike, because you've got to carry roughly 32 litres to make the fuel distance. So the way the rear tanks are designed, you also probably have to run a low slung exhaust. And again, you don't want to heat your fuel up too much, so having your muffler right by your fuel when it's already really hot is not the best idea. You get a bit of vaporization issues and so on. So, Abel, I'm really sorry. I'm going to murder your last name, so I won't try. How can we have one? That's actually pretty easy. You basically place an order with the Drag'On Yamaha team. They're the guys that build those bikes. They build them to order. So you say, right, I want one of those bikes, and they go and buy you a WR450F, and they pull it apart and they put it back together like a rally bike.
It's pretty cool to see, wasn't it?
It
in the
was
workshop?
really cool
Yeah.
to see. Yeah, they've got loads of bits of stock WRs just sitting there, and on the shelves they've got stacks of forks ready to be worked on, and
Yeah, it was cool.
yeah, it was cool. They make a huge amount of that stuff in house or in local machine shops as well. So yeah, it's a pretty cool thing they've got going.
Definitely.
Greg Tranter, the price is it's €28,000. There's no other way to cut that. She's suddenly making your GSA look like a really cheap bike.
But when you start breaking it down,
yeah, the cost is entirely because of how much man hours goes into converting that bike from a stock bike into that rally bike.
And what you get on it. Look at the navigation system. Look at the
entirely.
Yeah, there's a lot more than meets the eye.
I
It's
mean,
not,
that bike is basically a custom frame, a custom subframe,
swinging arm,
a custom gearbox,
suspension.
piston, ignition, fuel tanks, navigation tower. It's all their own design. They change all of that stuff. They've tested it. They've put the hours in to make that bike a bike that can win. Can win stages in Dakar, if not the whole race.
Yeah,
you know, to make an enduro bike a bike that can go wide open for 2 weeks straight without needing a top end is
it's
a big feat, and that's kind of what you pay for, really. I mean, maybe we're just justifying that because we want to buy one, but so next question, Mike Bailey, how many crashes did Neil have? So unless he crashed where I didn't see him and the camera wasn't, there were no crashes all day.
there were none.
There were no crashes.
There was no crashes.
There was some nervous riding. There were some moments on the GoPro footage.
Yeah, totally.
Some holes missed, but there were no crashes. So
can I just say then, me and Mike Bailey have got a little bit of a past. He is very quick in the sand. Just saying that.
So Glenn Heindians, I would assume that's like a Dutch surname. Again, sorry if I murdered that. What engine tuning is involved? So there's a slight difference in the engine tuning between the customer version that we rode and the factory version, but the main components are they changed the gearbox for a stronger version with stock ratios.
Yeah.
So it's the same gearbox, just made stronger, so it doesn't melt in the heat. They changed the piston for their own design that's stronger than stock, and they were kind of a bit coy about it, but it has to make more power somewhere, so I'm going to suggest that they're making more power with maybe a higher compression or something. They changed the cams, and then they took the wiring loom away and replaced it with a YZ one and a Get ignition with their own maps.
Yeah.
And that essentially gets you from WR
to a very fast
rally bike that feels nothing like any WR you ever rode.
No, definitely not. And doesn't feel like the motocross bike either.
Yeah.
Feels even faster than the motocross bike. And in them deep sandy conditions, it was a hell of an engine.
Yeah. There's a couple of other things in that as well. They can make more power because they run bigger radiators and they've got more flow through the exhaust. So between those two, you can push the engine further because it's not running as hot and you've got more airflow. It's the same principle KTM build their bike on. They put massive radiators on it and a big fan and have a huge air intake and a big exhaust. And then because the bike's not hot and they've got loads of airflow, they make loads of power. That I've simplified it a lot there. So Steve Stout asked quite a complex question about basically why are there no production 450 bikes like this, kind of 450 adventure bikes, when there's apparently a huge demand for it. And it's quite a complex question, but the main reason I would suggest is actually because of emissions law. There's Euro 4 emissions and very soon, surprisingly soon, Euro 5 emissions. And those are being replicated around the world in different countries. So even countries like India are becoming really strict on their emissions laws. They quite recently, at the same time as Euro 4 came in, they had a new standard come in that was much stricter than it had been. And the same thing is kind of happening all over the world. And the problem with 450 singles or 500 singles is that they're really hard to meet emissions laws and have good power and longevity. And for a lot of riding, a 450 single is a bit crap. It's pretty unpleasant to ride, you know.
Yeah.
You can make nice, smooth, soft single 4-strokes, or you can make big, strong single 4-strokes. But that kind of middle ground is quite unpleasant when you're not riding them in an aggressive off-road manner. You know, if you just rode a 500 EXC to work and then went and did some trail riding on it, not particularly pleasant. And I think the second reason is that engine, if they create an adventure bike out of that engine, it's kind of a one-use thing. So they would build a 500cc adventure bike, but the problem is they can't use that engine for any other type of bike. So a really good example is KTM's 690 or their new 790. They use that one engine in a different state of tune in 3 or 4 bikes. They make way more money from it than they would if they go out and put loads of development into producing one bike.
And there isn't really the market for it. There's a few people who want...
Yeah, and that's the last point, is that, you know, a manufacturer like KTM or Triumph, when they build an 800 adventure bike, they're looking at selling 10, 15, 20,000 units a year of the same engine. And I would suggest that they've probably done their market research to try and gauge whether that market's there or not. And they, at the moment, clearly feel like all of those parameters add up to it not being a feasible thing. I might be wrong. In a few years that might change. It looks like those manufacturers are starting to build more off-road focused bikes than they have for a long time. 790 KTM and Yamaha T7 being obvious options, but that's my answer to your question there. Next question is from Harold May. Weight. So they're a little bit coy about exact figures on this stuff, but it's around 145 without fuel. So the fuel capacity is 31 litres. So you could say between 145 and 176, somewhere around that sort of weight.
It didn't feel heavy. It felt it was tall, but the weight was well distributed and it was so stable. Yeah. So it didn't feel like a heavy bike.
Yeah. I mean, it was running pretty light on fuel, but I generally think, those rally bikes all work out about the same sort of weight. They're always full of fuel or about 175 to 180. And the last question we've got is from Mike Rowley on Twitter. He's at Uncle Traveller. He says, tell us about the fuel systems, how many tanks, and how the nav tower is fixed to the frame. So I think I'm right in saying that it's 4 fuel tanks. So they have 2 on the front, the stock center tank on the WR sits behind the airbox, and then 1 subframe rear tank that attaches to the subframe. This is one of my favorite bits about this bike. Like they basically, when they strip it, they send the frame away and they have all new lugs welded on the frame. They do the same thing with the subframe. They have it cut and reshape and new lugs welded on it. It was really nice to see someone go to that much length to make sure it was done properly so they could have the tanks the shape they wanted. And those 4 tanks are split into 2 sections. So they have the stock fuel pump in the standard tank. So the rear tank and the standard tank work together, and then the 2 front tanks are also the same. They have a second fuel pump, so you can choose to drain the front tanks or the rear tanks first, which is pretty cool.
Which is very cool, yeah. And we're forgetting the bike has to carry water as well.
Yeah, so they put that in the subframe.
Really cool.
But it wasn't
in the swinging arm. It was so cool.
It was in the swinging arm. Sorry,
neat, tidy.
All of that work was really beautiful. When the extended swing arm and all the kind of manufacturing work that they've done a really nice job of. And the nav tower is the same. So they basically weld the bracket to the headstock of the navigation tower, and then the navigation tower bolts onto that. My understanding,
it's really beautifully done. There's a bit of close-up footage on one of the videos.
Yeah, it will be in the review video.
It's really nice. Really nice.
They've got an oil cooler mounted to it. Yeah, it's well done.
That whole
it's not as
navigation
cool as
is-
the KTM's carbon fiber one,
No,
but
it looks strong.
it looks strong.
And when
well
I was
designed.
riding the bike, I was conscious about looking at it. You might see it on some of the sort of the GoPro footage. You can physically see the road book really well, but once or twice when I messed up a little and hit a hole, my chin piece on the helmet touched the navigation tower, but it's not in the way. It doesn't feel in any way weak. It's a solid, strong design and neat and tidy, which is cool.
Yeah, no, it was a really beautiful bike. I'm quite jealous I didn't get to ride it really. And so that's about it. If you've got any questions, I'm going to hang out in the comment section for about an hour after this goes live. So hit us up, let us know what you want to know, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. And otherwise, guys, remember, life's better when you're riding.